Cambodia, the Kingdom of Wonders. Hi, I'm Maria Rose Emily Ang Velas, and our topic for today is about macroeconomics of Cambodia. Macroeconomics covers the markets, GDP, labor, prices, money, trade, government, and taxes. First is the Cambodia market. This is a graph for the currency of Cambodia as it changes from time to time, and it is being represented by the colors red and green. The Cambodian real spot exchange rate specifies how much one currency, the US dollars, is currently worth in terms of the other. While the US dollar to Cambodian real spot exchange rate is quoted and exchanged in the same day, the US dollar to Cambodian real forward rate is quoted today, but for delivery and payment on a specific future date. So for 2009 to 2014, the highest so far is 4,310, while the lowest is 3,000. So second is the gross domestic product or GDP. It includes Cambodia GDP, Cambodia GDP annual growth rate, Cambodia GDP per capita, Cambodia GDP per capita PPP or purchasing power parity. Let's begin with the gross domestic product or GDP. As we can see in the graph, from 2004 to 2013, the GDP increases. The gross domestic product or GDP measures the national income and output for a given country's economy. The gross domestic product is equal to the total expenditures for all final goods and services produced within the country in a stipulated period of time. So as you can see, you have there the actual, previous, highest, lowest, the dates, unit, and frequency of the Cambodia GDP. So far, it is on the year 2013, which has the highest GDP in the amount of 14.06 US dollar billion. So let's proceed to the Cambodia GDP annual growth rate. Here is the graph for the Cambodia GDP annual growth rate. Cambodia's economy mostly depends on agriculture. Nevertheless, in recent years, the importance of manufacturing has been growing due to establishment of export-oriented textile and shoes factories. Cambodia is also taking advantage of fast-developing tourism sector. More importantly, oil deposits found beneath Cambodia's territorial waters and the prospective exploration of mineral resources such as bauxite, gold, iron, and gems will likely reshape Cambodia's economy. Currently, services are the biggest sector in the economy and account for 38% of total GDP. The industry sector accounts for 29% of GDP, and agriculture has the lowest share of 26%. As you can see there, from 7.1% in 2012, it increases into 7.3% in 2013. Let's have the GDP per capita. The GDP per capita is obtained by dividing the country's gross domestic product, adjusted by inflation, with the total population. As of 2004 to 2012, the highest so far is 671.60 US dollars and the lowest is 241.80 US dollars. Lastly, the GDP per capita PPP or purchasing power parity. This is the graph for the year 2004 to 2012. The GDP per capita PPP is obtained by dividing the country's gross domestic product adjusted by purchasing power parity by the total population. In this graph, the highest is 2,149.83 US dollars and the lowest is 773.92 US dollars. Here is the summary for the gross domestic product or GDP, with its GDP annual growth rate, GDP per capita, and GDP per capita purchasing power parity. For the third macroeconomic topic, we have the labor. The number of employed persons in Cambodia decreased to 7,706 in 2012 from 7,891 in 2011. Employed persons in Cambodia averaged 7,420 from 2004 until 2012, reaching an all-time high of 7,891 in 2011 and a record low of 6,577 in 2004. Employed persons in Cambodia is reported by the National Institute of Statistics of Cambodia. In labor, we have the employed persons. Here is a graph for the employed persons of Cambodia. As we can see in the graph, in the year 2013, it has 7,706 employed persons. So far in the year 2012, it has the highest employed persons. Next is the Cambodia population. This is the graph for the Cambodia population. The total population in Cambodia was last recorded at 14.9 million people in 2012, from 5.7 million in 1960, changing 160% during the last 50 years. Population in Cambodia averaged 9.32 million from 1960 until 2012, reaching an all-time high of 14.86 million in 2012 and a record low of 5.72 million in 1960. Population in Cambodia is reported by the World Bank. Let's have the unemployment rate. This is the graph for the unemployment rate of Cambodia. In Cambodia, the unemployment rate measures the number of people actively looking for a job as a percentage of the labor force. Here is the summary for the labor, which includes employed persons, population, and unemployment rate. Okay, so let's proceed. The fourth one is price. The inflation rate in Cambodia was recorded at 4.29% in February of 2014. Inflation rate in Cambodia averaged 5.40% from 1995 until 2014, reaching an all-time high of 35.57% in May of 2008 and a record low of negative 5.69% in May of 2009. Inflation rate in Cambodia is reported by the National Institute of Statistics of Cambodia. Here is the graph of the Cambodia inflation rate from April 2013 to January 2014. In Cambodia, the most important components of Consumer Price Index or CPI are food and non-alcoholic beverages 44.8%, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels 17.1%, transport 12.2%, restaurants 5.9%, and health 5.1%. Other items include clothing and footwear 3%, recreation and culture 2.9%, furnishings and household maintenance 2.7%. The index also takes into account miscellaneous goods and services 2.3%, alcoholic beverages, tobacco and narcotics 1.6%, education 1.2%, and communication 1.1%. Our fifth macroeconomic topic is money. In Cambodia, the National Bank of Cambodia does not set an official interest rate. Instead, the benchmark interest rate is the average saving deposit rate. For the year 2013, the interest rate is 1.42%. For the year 1994 to 2014, the highest is 10.70 while the lowest is 1.23%. Our sixth topic is trade. First is the Cambodia gold reserves. Gold reserves in Cambodia remained unchanged at 12.44 tons in the fourth quarter of 2013, from 12.44 tons in the third quarter of 2013. Gold reserves are countries' gold assets held or controlled by the central bank. Let's have the Cambodia tourist arrivals. Tourist arrivals in Cambodia decreased to 283,787 in September of 2013 from 342,064 in August of 2013. Tourist arrivals in Cambodia averaged 329,670 from 2012 until 2013, reaching an all-time high of 382,326 in December of 2012 and a record low of 283,787 in September of 2013. Tourist arrivals in Cambodia is reported by the National Institute of Statistics of Cambodia. Here is its graph. Next is the balance of trade. Exports in Cambodia increased to 1,826.60 million US dollars in the third quarter of 2013 from 1,530.30 million US dollars in the second quarter of 2013. Exports in Cambodia averaged 1,270.72 million US dollars from 2009 until 2013, reaching an all-time high of 1,826.60 million US dollars in the third quarter of 2013 and a record low of 800 million US dollars in the first quarter of 2010. Exports in Cambodia is reported by the National Bank of Cambodia. So here is its graph from 2011 to 2013. The garment industry in Cambodia has been expanding rapidly, and as a result, textiles account for more than 70% of total exports. Cambodia's other exports include footwear, natural rubber, and fish products. Cambodia mainly imports petroleum products, fabrics, vehicles, wholesale yarn, cigarettes, electrical communication equipment, and medicine. Cambodia's main trading partners are the United States, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Canada, and Vietnam. Let's have Cambodia current account. Cambodia recorded a current account deficit of 126.50 million US dollars in the third quarter of 2013. Current account in Cambodia averaged negative 247.87 million US dollars from 2009 until 2013, reaching an all-time high of 374.40 million US dollars in the third quarter of 2010 and a record low of negative 636.50 million US dollars in the second quarter of 2012. Current account in Cambodia is reported by the National Bank of Cambodia. Current account is the sum of the balance of trade, exports minus imports of goods and services, net factor income such as interest and dividends, and net transfer payments such as foreign aid. As shown in the graph, the highest is 374.40 million US dollars and the lowest is negative 636.50 million US dollars. Next is the current account to GDP. Cambodia recorded a current account deficit of 8.60% of the country's gross domestic product in 2013. Current account to GDP in Cambodia averaged negative 4.35% from 1994 until 2013, reaching an all-time high of 0.61% in 1997 and a record low of negative 9% in 2012. Current account to GDP in Cambodia is reported by the National Bank of Cambodia. Next is the Cambodia exports. Cambodia's exports are dominated by textile goods, which account for around 70% of total exports. Other export products include vehicles, footwear, natural rubber, and fish. Cambodia's main export partners are the United States, Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada, Germany, and the UK. For the year 2011 to 2013, the highest is 1,826.60 million US dollars and the lowest is 800 million US dollars. Next is the Cambodia imports. Here is a graph for the Cambodia imports as of 2011 to 2013. Cambodia mainly imports petroleum products, fabrics, vehicles, wholesale yarn, cigarettes, electrical communications equipment, and medicine. Cambodia's main import partners are China, Thailand, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Taiwan, and South Korea. Here is the summary for trade, which covers gold reserves, tourist arrivals, balance of trade, current account to GDP, exports and imports. For our seventh macroeconomic topic is the government. Let's begin with the government debt to GDP. Cambodia recorded a government debt to GDP of 28.12% of the country's gross domestic product in 2013. Government debt to GDP in Cambodia averaged 33.32% from 1996 until 2013, reaching an all-time high of 43.16% in 2003 and a record low of 27.46% in 2008. Government debt to GDP in Cambodia is reported by the World Bank of Cambodia. So here is its graph. Generally, government debt as a percent of GDP is used by investors to measure a country's ability to make future payments on its debt, thus affecting the country borrowing costs and government bond yields. For the year 1996 to 2013, the highest rate for the government debt to GDP is 43.16%, and as shown in the graph, in the year 2009, it has the lowest rate, which is 27.46%. Next is Cambodia government to budget. This is the graph of the Cambodia government budget. Government budget is an itemized accounting of the payments received by the government, such as taxes and other fees, and the payments made by the government, such as purchases and other payments. A budget deficit occurs when a government spends more money than it takes in. The opposite of a budget deficit is a budget surplus. The last subtopic for the Cambodia government is the credit rating. As you can see, there's Cambodia, and so far Cambodia has a stable credit rating. Here is the summary of the Cambodia government. It includes the government debt to GDP, government budget, and the Cambodia credit rating. So that's it. Yay! We're now in the last topic of the macroeconomics of Cambodia. And for 8, it's all about taxes. Let's begin with the Cambodia corporate tax. In Cambodia, the corporate income tax rate is a tax collected from companies. Its amount is based on the net income companies obtain while exercising their business activity, normally during one business year. The benchmark we use refers to the highest rate for corporate income. Revenues from the corporate tax rate are an important source of income for the government of Cambodia. As you have noticed, in this graph, the corporate tax rate in Cambodia stands at 20% starting from the year 2010 up to 2014. Okay, so the next kind of tax is the personal income tax. Just like in the previous graph, the personal income tax rate in Cambodia stands at 20% starting from the year 2010. So let's proceed to the last kind of tax, the Cambodia sales tax rate. Here is the graph for the Cambodia sales tax rate. As you can see there, the sales tax rate in Cambodia stands at 10%. In Cambodia, the sales tax rate is a tax charged to consumers based on the purchase price of certain goods and services. The benchmark we use for the sales tax rate refers to the highest rates. Revenues from the sales tax rate are an important source of income for the government of Cambodia. Here is the summary for the Cambodia taxes. It includes corporate tax rate, personal income tax rate, and sales tax rate. And that is the summary for the macroeconomics of Cambodia. I hope you've learned something. Thanks for watching.